Hello, I've worked on these before. It's a tape for the Philips V2000 or Video2000 system, which goes in both ways. It was a rather complicated format. The machines were not very reliable, but when I do work on them, I tend to prefer the later models that are a bit more compact and, well, still unreliable. But I'm less keen on the earlier Philips VR2020 and similar models. They just tend to be too bulky and unreliable. Anyway,
Hey Dad, do you know
yes.
Scan Van Allen for all your photo scanning needs?
Oh, yes, I know Alan. I've done quite a lot of work with him over
Well, he's
time.
dropped something off for you.
Oh, really? Oh, my! Let's have a look at this then. Okay, what do we have here? It stinks of burnt capacitor. So, Alan told me this had been in storage for a while, and he tried it out the other day, and he got a bang and lots of smoke pouring out the back. Well, we all know what that was, don't we? There's a filter capacitor in the back of the mains input, and they go short circuit and lots of smoke pours out. So, it absolutely stinks. Let's replace that and see if there's any life in the rest of the machine. So, it's a VR2023. This is one of the better of these first generation V2000 machines in that it has picture search. The very early model, the 2020 and 2021, were very basic machines. Cosmetically, well, it's lost a panel. I may have one of those on a scrap machine. It does have the remote control receiver. That's nice because if we can get it working, you can use you can get these like £1 remote controls from pound shop, or you certainly used to be able to, and they can have the codes which will operate this machine. Around the back we have the mains input, so it's just behind there. They've burnt out capacitor, and these have AV ports, so you can do audio and video in and out. The early models you had to get an external plug-in gadget with a transistor and a little bit of electronics to do the video out, which was a complete nuisance. So that's much better, albeit it's a rather non-standard configuration on this connector. Now, since it's been some time since I last worked on these, I can't quite remember how to access the back, but we'll start by taking the receiver off. We'll take the bottom off. I think then we need to take the top off, and we should have some access then. So, taking the bottom off, we have one big screw in the middle, and I think about 4 screws around the edge. Do we need to take the receiver off? I'm not certain, actually. Okay, looking underneath, we have some cobwebs here, but it's not absolutely filthy. It's not been stored anywhere damp. It doesn't look too bad. From memory, having taken those screws at the bottom, I now need to give the top a push back. And as this has been on here a long time, it could be quite a sharp push back to unjam it and release it from the sort of clasps at the back. Starting to get that. There we go. So our two top priorities will be the filter capacitor that's stinking on the back of the mains input and looking at the battery on the CPU chip. To get to the back of this filter assembly in here, which is where the mains input goes in and where the capacitor is, I think we have to take the whole power supply out. So let's work on that assumption. There's a screw here on the back which has clearly got to come out. We need to release the front in order to get enough room to get the power supply out. I'm not sure if we have to take the transformer component out yet. Another screw at the front of the power supply. Okay, that was a horrendous faff just to get to one silly little capacitor. I expect a lot of people just leave it there, burnt out. Okay, I can't quite feed this cable through to give me as much access as I wanted, so I have to work in situ. But there's our burnt out, I think that might be a reefer capacitor. It's certainly one of the same construction. It's 0.056 microfarads. The ones I have I think are a bit higher value, but they are proper safety rated components. Let's see what I have. Okay, mine are 0.22 microfarad, but that will physically fit and do the job. So let's desolder that, and then we can reassemble it all. Here's our blown up capacitor, and I'm going to take this physically out of the house and put that in a bin because it stinks. I think it's worth leaving a date on there for when this component was changed. If anybody comes to work on this machine in the future, they know they don't need to worry about that. Right, next, which is the CPU board? Is it this end one? Right, I've released it from the bottom by pushing the plastic clips out the way a little bit. Now I'm going to take these connectors off as I go along. Okay, CPU board out. And has this battery leaked all over the place? No, it hasn't. It's in remarkably good condition. So we're really lucky, because sometimes, depending how the machine's stored, that can leak under these ICs, making an awful mess, really actually trashing the board. I can see a little bit of contamination here, so I'll have a look at what that is, but it doesn't look too bad at all. Oh no, I think these look like splodges of ink or something. I don't think that's contamination. Okay, that looks like it's some kind of ink marking there. Yeah, these are the black marks that I thought were originally possibly contamination, but no, they're ink marks of some sort. So nothing to worry about there. Let's get this capacitor out. I don't know if I have a replacement, so I may just have to cut it out, but it'd be nice if I could replace it, wouldn't it? That I think is made of 3 cells. They're like short cells, so I think this is a 3.6 volt one. I don't have anything suitable in stock. I used to buy these cells from various suppliers, but what I can use these days I find are these. These are much more readily available. It's nickel metal hydride 1.2 volt. It's 1/3 AAA, whereas this is based on AA, so it's 1/3 AA that. But of course these have got more capacity than they had anyway. So you could assemble 3 of those together to replace this. The first thing I'll do though is just simply remove this from the board. Must be very careful when you remove that you don't get a solder splash, just like this. Because that would cause a problem. See, no solder resist on this board. Cheaped out, Philips. I can refit that board. I'll order in some replacement cells to make up a new battery, and we'll just power it up and see what we get, shall we? Okay, it's back together again. We're ready for the great switch on. What could possibly go wrong? Well, what could possibly go right? I mean, it's not going to work, is it? Right, let's power it up. Fairly encouraging start. Mechanically sounds okay. Let's try eject. Wow, that's not bad. Okay. Tape out and in. I always like to start with fast forward and rewind. It went click. Oh. Fast forward, and then it stopped. Is it the end of the tape? Maybe. Let's hit rewind. So it's somewhere in the middle of the tape and it keeps shutting down. You can see the light on there, and then it's stopping. Maybe it's not seeing the spools rotating. The tape counter's not going. There's a clue. So whatever it does, it won't do it for very long because it's not seeing spool rotation. So it goes into an emergency stop. We can try play, but it clearly won't go for very long if it goes at all. So it sounds like it's laced up. Click. And then it shuts down because there's no operation of that. Okay. You know, it's logical because we're not getting any counter on there. The machine is shutting down. because it's not seeing rotation. Okay, let's look into that. You can get the machine to attempt to operate with no tape in there. So if I just hit wind or fast forward now, you'll see both motors spinning in a moment in opposite directions. This one fast forwarding and this providing rear back tension. And that awful noise there is, I think, because it's doing the emergency stop. Similarly, rewind, it looks like both motors go, which seems odd, but it's because you're getting back tension from the opposite motor. Right, I have to remind myself how it detects operation of the spools. Is it an opto sensor or is it a tacho? Might be easier just to take a look. No. The way you access this deck, you take the whole deck out and you can work it in a service position. You can sit the deck on its side somewhere. I've done it in the past. You can sit the whole deck on its side and work on it in situ. And we may have to do that. So I think I'm probably going to have to take the deck out, but let's investigate what the motion detection system is supposed to be. Okay, according to the service manual, there should be opto sensors P60A and P60B, which are either side of these reels. There's also one for tape slack. I don't think that will be our operation for fast forward and rewind. I think that will only be during play. So let's look on pins 2 and 14 of the motor control module U182 for the signals coming in of the opto sensors. So that's this end board. I should be able to get to it, hopefully, from underneath the machine. So if I have my diagram set up correctly, this end board here should be the motor control board. Some silk screening would have been nice. Philips. Okay, and we should get an 11 volt peak to peak waveform on those. So let's see what we see. I'll select fast forward. I'm getting something. And what's more, the tape counter's now working. Ha! And the machine's continuing to run. How peculiar. Okay, let's try fast forward. Yep, that was working. It keeps stopping and then working again. Okay, that's working. Right, let's try tape. Rewind. It always seems to not work the first time and then work on the second operation. Let's try play. That's progressing. Well, it's worth checking to see if we have a picture, I'd say. Okay, I don't have the AV cable just to hand, so for a moment, just in the first instance, I will just use the aerial connection, I think. Our TV tuner is not finding a signal. Not really. I think that is it, but it's just a scrambled mess. Okay, we're getting nowhere with that, so we're going to have to, I think, use an AV cable. I'll have to find a suitable AV cable for use with this machine. Well, I found this. It's a cable that was connected to a different V2000 machine, actually a Grundig. And it's an adapter here, which goes from DIN connector, which is the same physical layout as on here, so I'm assuming it's the same pinout, and you get a composite video out and audio out and possibly in on this 5-pin DIN connector. So another adapter cable here goes from this to audio in and out, so that's out. So that's audio out and video out on this female connector, so I can now connect that to my monitor and see if we get anything resembling a picture. Okay, we now have it hooked up. Let's see if we get picture and sound from this tape. That looks promising. Okay, I'm seeing a very slight sort of flickering, brightness flickering in bands across the screen. So maybe we have a little bit of noise coming through from the power supply, I'm guessing. Can I freeze frame it? I'm not sure what button does what. Does that freeze frame? Just a slight shimmer in brightness, and it's moving up and down, but it's quite hard to see, and I don't suppose you'll be able to see it at all on that. So maybe we have a filter capacitor, a capacitor in the output side of the power supply needs checking, or maybe it will just reform itself with a little bit of use. These old-fashioned capacitors can do that. I'll try a different tape as well, but that's looking really quite promising. Let's try my favourite test tape. Okay, well that's not so good, is it? We're having tracking trouble. And this is sort of V2000 trouble all over, isn't it? The tracking system on V2000 is complex. I'm going to tap on the DTF board in case we may have more connection type troubles, as we seem to have with the sensor issue earlier. Let's go back to the tape it came with. No, that's not tracking either, no. Select picture search, that tracks. Go back to play, it's okay. How interesting. Just tried another tape. It struggled a little bit with tracking for a while, and then it seemed to settle down and play it. I'm seeing a fair amount of grain on the image, which could be on the original recording, but and V2000 was a somewhat grainy format. But that might indicate headwear, and maybe headwear can cause poor tracking because it needs to pick up the helper signals from the video signal. The video bandwidth includes some helper signals, some tones, and it needs to pick those up clearly in order to be able to find out when it's mistracking. So there's a small possibility that it's just head wear or even just head contamination, which could clean itself up just by using it, or I might have a go at cleaning the heads manually. Let's just try another recording, flip the tape over. Looking at the heads, I didn't think they looked contaminated. These heads can oxidize a bit. There's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of oxidation on the head. Can you see on the top of the drum there, there's some white marks. Probably not enough to stop the machine from working though. But yeah, there's a fair bit of it. So that might improve just by letting it play some tapes for a while. So there it's mistracking all over the place, but if I go into picture search, does that help? Yep, it settles down on picture search. And then I select play. And it seems to settle down. Well, I've got the machine working pretty well. It will play most tapes eventually, but you have to use picture search sometimes to get it to play. I guess that's not too big a deal, but looking, I've got a freeze frame here, which of course eliminates any noise on the original recording, so we're looking only at noise on the pickup and amplifiers within this machine, and it is a bit noisy. I'll zoom you in some more. Right, I think you can see that. It is a noisy image. Now V2000 is a bit like that, but I think this is worse than some machines. So it's probably not within the specification it would have been when it was new. But if I hit play, it will play the tape. The machine works intermittently. It tends to be that I have to use picture search from time to time, and then it'll start tracking nicely and often carry on fine until there's a glitch in the tape or something, or change in the program, and then it'll lose tracking again. The thing is that when it loses tracking, it also loses the tracking in freeze frame, which eliminates anything to do with the capstan drive and proves that it has to be purely the DTF that's playing up. Of course, it's working now, isn't it? But it's see if I can instigate the problem. In picture search, it's working now, but a lot of the time it doesn't work, and I don't know where the fault will lie. I can start going through the service manual and looking for these helper tones and things, but I think before I do that, because access is so poor if you don't have an extender card, I think I'm just going to take the DTF board out, which is this one, I believe. Take that board out and check for dry joints, because I've read they're a bit prone to dry joints on that high voltage board. So let's do that and try not to get zapped in the process. Right, this is track sensing board, which is the DTF board. So I'm going to get that out and have a look at it. But they can apparently hold voltages for a little while after it's switched off. So I'll be a little careful with that. Okay, I'm going to inspect that for any dry joints, although it doesn't look like that's going to be a problem. I'll also clean up the contacts on the bottom. Oh yeah, I've seen some slightly poor contacts on the underneath of these coils here, so I'll resolder those, but nothing that I'd really call a smoking gun, but it's worth giving a quick resolder of those. Okay, so I cleaned those contacts, resoldered a lot of these coils and anything else that didn't look nice. Coils, of course, at a microscopic level they do vibrate, so I often find that coils do have something resembling dry joints on them. Right, so I'll reassemble that, but I'm sure it won't fix the problem. At least it's fairly easy to get out and try. Looking at the schematics or the diagrams, we can see that a lot of the boards are just not relevant. Pressing pause and seeing a fault in pause is really helpful because it eliminates anything to do with tape servo. And head servo, well, the picture would slip, so it's not head servo, nothing to do with control, and most of this stuff on the other side here is signal processing and the CPU board. So that's the only board that would be relevant. Probably. I think one or two of the signals goes through other things, and of course there's always a power supply. But if it's something silly like a dry joint, we might just possibly have got there. I doubt it. I'll test it with the most difficult tape it's been struggling with, because some of the other tapes seem to play better than that one. No, of course it didn't help. But if we do a bit of picture search, one way or the other, then it stabilises, and then very often we can play. Isn't that interesting? Here's proof that the fault lies in the DTF system, because we are in freeze frame now, which means the spools are completely stationary. I can see that they are. It's not shuffling them at all. So it's nothing to do with the capstan servo, or as they call it, tape servo system. It's purely DTF. I've got two trains of thought at the moment. One is that the DTF board may have a fault. The other is that we may have poor contacts on the... I've got two trains of thought at the moment. One is a fault on the DTF board. It'd be really handy if I had a spare. Another is that we may have contact trouble where there's a set of fingers on the bottom of the... Oh, actually, I think there's a set of tracks on the bottom of the head and fingers that touch those and connect the actuators to the machine. So if they were less than good contacts, then it could struggle. And it may be that by putting it through picture search, it uses a higher voltage on the actuator, and it just may be like making a spark and thereby making the connection. So that would kind of line up. So I may take the head off and have a look at the state of the contacts underneath that. Maybe it'd be nice to just change the head. I've got replacement heads, but not for this model. I've got heads for the earlier 2020 and 21 models, which didn't have picture search, and there's a lower voltage on the actuators. So I think I have to take off the contact or the opto sensor here, which is for the head spinning. You see this little flag there that goes through an opto sensor on here. So I'll have to remove that, and then there's a way of taking this head off. I can't quite remember what it is, but it's something to do with this little spigot in here. I can't quite remember. I'll set you up when I do that, if I do that, to see how we get that off. But the even better thing would be just, quickly try another DTF board if I had one. So what I could really use is a spare VR2023 scrap machine, but I don't think I've got any of them anywhere.
I found this in your storeroom. Will this help?
Oh, right. A scrap VR2023. Let's see if this can help. What's a bit unfortunate is my workshop bench is just not big enough to have two of these machines out at once. So it's going to be a little bit fiddly working on it, but let's see what I can do. It does have the remains of a label on it which says, has been seen working, at least occasionally. So hopefully, we've got something we can go with here. Do you have any screws in the bottom? Or are they all out? So you have to kind of ease the front up slightly and then push the whole thing to the back. Okay, let's start by borrowing the tracking. It's already a bit loose. May have had some history already. I'll quickly check it for dry joints and then I'll try it in this machine. Again, maybe it's worth resoldering a little bit on these coils, but other than that it looks fine. Okay, that board's swapped out. Let's just see if anything's changed. And if not, we'll look at the head drum, the slip rings on the bottom of the head drum, and maybe swap in the head itself. I go straight for the tape that the machine found most difficult to play. Oop, my fault. It's at least as bad, if not worse. Let's see if it's capable of coming back to life or if it's actually worse due to a totally defective board. Look, reverse picture search, it's tracking okay. Yes, okay, now it's tracking. So these two boards are doing exactly the same. Right, I'll refit the original board and then I'll have a look at the heads. Okay then, try to remind myself how you take the heads off, because it's something to do with this screw or whatever it is here. Do we undo the screws on the top first? Can't remember. I've just got this memory that this is not the way you have to do this, but I can't remember the proper route. I looked in the service manual, it doesn't help. I've slackened that off. Not completely removed it, just slackened it off. And there we go with the head drum. It's not hit the tips on there. Make sure the head tips are nowhere near that anyway. Right. Oh yeah, those. Well, they're the slip rings there, and these are the coils. They're the head tips, and down the bottom are the contacts for the slip rings. So it's worth cleaning this up. But before I do that, I think I'll initially just try the other head drum. and clean those contacts. Okay, that's all reassembled, but I'm pretty concerned about the amount of contamination on the drum. But let's just see if it overcomes our initial problems with tracking. Okay, let's... Good. Right. No picture at all? Could just be contaminated heads. I should have cleaned them. Why didn't I think of that? That is most likely the cause. I might just leave it playing for a minute and see if it cleans itself up. Let's see if I can just clean those head tips a bit. And then I'll leave it playing the tape for a while. Well, either we've still got head clog or one of those heads is dysfunctional, but I'll just leave it for a while and see what happens. Well, it's not cleaned up. I think these heads are defective. What is the answer? Maybe the answer is 42. I'll put the other heads back and see what goes on. I will have a look at those head tips under the microscope in a moment. Well, neither head tip appears to be smashed anyway. Well, the one with the green windings, you can see the tip shining under the lights of the microscope. And the one with the red winding, yes, you can see that too. That certainly looks okay to me. Well, neither appears to be defective from what I can see. Let's just compare that to the heads we'd taken out. Here's our red winding. And the green. I'm not seeing any obvious differences. Okay, let's refit this head drum. Okay, with the original heads refitted, let's see where we are. Seems to take a second to be ready for you to press any buttons. Don't rush these things. Working at the moment. Well, that's promising. Let's test it some more. I tested this machine extensively last night and it worked perfectly. Next day, let's try it again, make sure we're still going. In a moment. Is it working? Yeah, it's working. It took a moment to stabilise, but it always did struggle with this tape. So I needed a replacement for that battery. Where is it? This thing. So that consists of 3 1/3 AA NiCads. They're available but expensive, especially when they're tagged like you'd have to have in order to make up that battery pack. So I've ordered in 3 nickel metal hydride AAA 1/3 and a AAA battery holder to mount them in. So this is a 1/3 AAA nickel metal hydride. Now I have been able to solder to these. I've got some special solder called Alusol, or another way around it is to just use lots of flux, and you can solder on them, but it's not ideal. You could damage the cell. So rather than that, I'll put 3 of those together with some heat shrink and then fit it in the battery holder, and that should work reliably, and I'll fit it on the CPU board of this machine. So that's a good running machine now. We'll call that a win. Now I'm not sure if that machine is going to take over from one of my other V2000 video recorders, because I have some others I should slightly prefer. One of them's here. This is one I've featured on the YouTube channel before, and it's a much smaller machine and it gives really good results. So this is the VR2023 and I did a whole heap of work on this a little while ago, and it's settled down to be a reliable machine, apart from the fact that I do have to select picture search for a few seconds one way or the other before playing a tape. I did that earlier today when I was playing a custom tape. It was fine. And what's it doing now? Was that a mechanical fault? What was going on then, do you think? Oh, it's not happy, is it? Look, it's flashing the display. So it must have glitched its power. I would hazard a guess that the overcurrent trip circuit is firing, and it's therefore shutting down the power supply. Oh dear. Right, so that needs repair. Well, that's a disaster. I really like this machine. It's definitely my best V2000 video recorder. Now, it could be a bit tricky trying to fix that overcurrent sense, if that's what it is, in the power supply, because all I'm going to see is everything bouncing around all the time. The voltages on the whole machine are going to be absolutely everywhere. So it'd be extremely hard to debug that. I do have a spare power supply, I think, from a scrap machine, but it's not that easy to swap the power supply over on these. They're quite embedded in the machine. So that may or may not be a solution. So there we are. That's another repair for another day. I'll do plenty more content on audio and video technology in the near future. Bye for now.